Hello and good evening. Very warm welcome to you all on the last day of ninth batch. My sincere gratitude to ICAI President and all Central Council members of ICAI. We at Committee for Members in Industry and Business have been continuing with this initiative since the month of April, and we are very happy with your positive feedback and your active participation in these sessions. We are very happy with the difference it has been making, and your encouragement has made different things possible. Our speakers from all around the world have put in a lot of efforts, and the assistance which you have got, the knowledge which you have gained with these sessions has made those efforts successful, and we thank you for that. Today, on the last day, we have two sessions. Wherein our first speaker, CA Ravi, will be talking on elevator pitch, and subsequently Ramesh will be talking on financial structuring. I would request all our members to please raise any questions which you may have during the session related to the topic, and we will do our best to answer those and also actively participate if our speaker asks for anything. So allow me to introduce our speaker, CA Ravi Gopal, who is based out of Dubai, UAE. Ravi has a bachelor's degree from Osmania University in Mathematics and Science. He qualified as an Indian Chartered Accountant from our institute, and subsequently he did CPA and CMA US certifications. He co-founded the Dubai chapter of the Institute of Management Accountants of USA in Dubai, where he was an active faculty member for the CMA certification exam for about 3 years. With an active interest in teaching and training, he continues to train students for professional examinations in his spare time. He has varied industry experience ranging from engineering services, manufacturing, construction, and others, having held senior finance positions in large organizations and in startups as well. Apart from his interest in professional subjects, he likes to constantly work on communication and presentation skills. He is currently serving as the president of Toastmasters Club, which is exclusively for Indian Chartered Accountants in Dubai. Thank you so much, Ravi, for being here and agreeing to do this session for our young members, those who have qualified in the last 5 years. And we are very confident that your knowledge in the subject will make a big difference. And the great thing is that you are a faculty for technical subjects and also for subjects like communication and leadership. And that will make it a great mix for our members. And the topic which you are covering is very important. Very often we talk about this, but we sometimes fail in properly executing it. So with this, I request all our young members, all who are present here today, to please give a big virtual round of applause for Ravi. And Ravi, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Singh. Thank you for the very warm and encouraging introduction. The topic I've chosen today, elevator pitch, has a lot of relevance because today everyone is short of time. Even though we have platforms for interaction like Zoom, or there's not much of time for anybody to talk to another person to present his or her case for either be it a job or a business proposal or an investment proposal or whatever you want to. When you go to someone, the tendency is to say, I don't have much time. Can you tell me what exactly you want? And that's where brings this huge challenge of having to say so much or a lot what you have in your mind into a very few sentences and in a concise manner, yet be effective. That is the point, and that is the beauty of this whole idea of what's called an elevator pitch. I would want to I've made a few slides to make the whole presentation a bit interactive or a bit more interesting to show some ideas. And I would like to share my screen now and take to the presentation. Is my screen clearly visible, Mr. Babaji?
Yes, Ravi. It's
Thank
perfect.
you. Thank you, sir. So, if you see the word elevator pitch, how did the word come about? If you were to meet somebody in an elevator, you spend a very short time with him. And if you were to have a conversation, you might just say hello, probably know the person's name, and just greet and leave. But if you were, during the time you spend in the elevator, have to make a case for what you want to do, probably you want to give him your visiting card and say, I am so-and-so, I would like to join your company. If there is anything, would you call me for an interview? And if you have to do that in the time the elevator kind of reaches from one floor to the other, even if it's 15 or 20 floors, imagine the time is very short. But this is a figurative way of saying that you're putting something across in the time you spend in an elevator. Now, the word pitch, as we all know, those who have seen investments, we know what's pitch deck, and you pitch in means you make a case for something. So an elevator pitch is a figurative way to describe a short conversation leading to an action in a short time. And I'll come back and say why we use the word an action. In this context, the pitch means something you persuade someone to buy something or to support you. And you have to make that persuasion in a short time. Now, as you see, the cartoon I've borrowed from somewhere, it says I've got an elevator pitch, I've got escalator and stairway pitch, which means this person is ready with script in mind, which is short, long, and longer, and so on. Now, let me take you through. I've looked at this subject in a bit of depth, and I found, I've tried to summarize it. I find these 5 steps are a bit interesting. I'll bring them on screen one on one. The first thing you would want to say to anybody is who you are and what you do. Of course, you have to introduce yourself. And the next step would be to bring in the context quickly. Because if you don't bring in the context, you have possibly allowed the other person to digress and go on into another subject, and it will be hard for you to bring him back into what the subject that you want to bring about. The second best thing is, I think by the picture you should be guessing by now, is to say what makes you. Another thing is the final one. You leave any elevator pitch with what's called a call to action. Because if you have not done that, you've lost the whole thing. Like any elevator pitch would want to say, this is what I want as the next step. What's the 5th step? Practice. Because we are professionals, we have learned a lot. We've gone through foundation, intermediate, we've gone through final, we've gone through so much of training, and there is so much in our minds some of the times. So when you have to put all this together in a short time, it needs practice. Basically, these are the 5 steps I could kind of visualize to make elevator pitch effective. What I'll do in the next few slides is take you through one after the other of these 5 steps. Now, the first thing is introduction. Who you are and what you do. When you meet somebody, it's very easy to introduce yourself, but sometimes if you're meeting a person in a crowd, or he's in his own thoughts, or is running through his own busy schedule, it's not easy as we think. Anyway, the fundamental rules of meeting a person and saying who you are is something we all seem to know, but it's important to bring that into action when you do a thing like an elevator pitch. The first thing was greet with enthusiasm and confidence. The person to whom you're probably saying, I want to join your company, I would like to come and see you, can you call me for an interview, would want to see some enthusiasm, like to see some confidence. If I'm talking to somebody and say, sir, my company has an investment proposal, I know you're an investment banker, or you work for a PE firm, I would want to talk to you at this time. What he is measuring is your confidence. Yet, be brief, again, sound confident. Be aware of your body language. Okay. A body language is something everybody knows of. Avoid things like standing very close to the person. Avoid things like folding your hands. And a few rules I would want to just talk through in terms of body language. Don't show the person that you're doing it consciously, but that has to be something like it's your natural form. So when you have meeting somebody, straight, align yourself in line with the person. Second, make an eye contact. Smile enthusiastically. And be prepared to listen to the person. Develop that immediate sense of empathy and just open your mind to be able to look straight into the eye and talk, smile, talk to him. That's the important posture of body language. The next word, and when you've done the initial greeting and when your body posturing is right, say what you have to say. Say something like what inspired you to do what you're doing. Say like, I found your private investment firm or private equity firm very interesting. You've done investments in these sectors. I've read about it. And incidentally, my company is in the same sector that you've previously invested or is in the same kind of investments that you've done. Can I talk to you about it? And this is what is special about my business. And be precise, be short. The most important thing of all this is the last line where I said, use pattern breaking statements. Now, what do I mean by pattern breaking statements? Let me put this in a bit of a context. Suppose you have attended a seminar and the speaker is somebody, say, from a vice president of a private equity firm or a mutual fund, and he's spoken about the money markets or stock market and something. If everybody has enjoyed the presentation, everybody is enlightened a bit, you're happy, everyone's learned something and has some takeaway. But you want to talk to that person and say something. So, suppose, for example, you come out of the conference room, meet this person at coffee. Obviously, you know all the situation. He's surrounded by people. And if you go to him and say, sir, I liked your presentation, was very good. Obviously, you can imagine, he will nod his head and say thank you and look to the next person. Because this is a standard statement everybody makes. You have not grabbed his attention. You might say something like, sir, I liked the idea of what you said, but I have something to say about it. Can I ask you a question? And that's not what everyone else is possibly saying. You have come away from the pattern. Now, imagine a similar situation where a similar kind of situation where you're going to somebody and you know the person has a job vacancy or he's the CEO or the managing director of the company and you want to say, sir, here's my card, I would like to come and see you for an interview. What would you say? If you say things like, sir, I'm a chartered accountant with so many years industry experience, you might want to say, sir, I'm a chartered accountant. No, that's again not pattern breaking. You might say, I'm a qualified professional with experience in this particular sector. I work for this MNCs and this is my special area of work. This is what I've achieved. But this is where you need to work out your dialogue. You need to work your method before you go and say something. Because this pattern breaking statement should be something that encourages the person. It arouses his or her interest and turns attention towards you. Let me move on to the next step of what we were talking. Always bring in the context. Say why you're saying what you're saying. And this is best achieved in the first two lines of the conversation. So for example, when I was talking to you in the earlier example, when I said you're talking to the vice president of a mutual fund, and you want to talk to him about how your company is performing and how something you have experienced in the stock market, and you want to give him some interesting facts. If that fact is in the first two lines, then the context is set. And suppose you are a consultancy firm, you're running your own practice, and you want to tell somebody that you specialize in consulting for GST for SMEs. If you go and tell him like, sir, I have practice and I do a lot of work in GST, that's not interesting for him. You say something like, sir, I run a practice where I specialize in training small and medium firms for achieving good practices in GST, avoiding all kinds of problems, and I've done this. Then you're offering a solution. Most important thing is pause, show receptivity to questions. After you made the initial conversation, the first greeting, and then brought in the context, pause. Possibly the person to whom you're talking to has a question for you. Or just wait for a couple of seconds or 10 to 20 seconds for him to think what you're saying. Remember, when you're talking to somebody, it's not necessary that he's giving you all the attention. His mind could be preoccupied with something else. Give him that pause. Help him think what you're saying, gather his question and talk to you. And the most important thing, it will always be a good idea to talk of common interest. When you talk of something in common, then there's a connection that's immediately established. Otherwise, the person is looking in one direction and you're looking in another direction. What makes you different? This is what we call a value proposition. A value proposition can be anything that if you're seeking employment, you can have your own value proposition in terms of what you can bring to the business where you're seeking to get into. If you're in consulting or practice, you have a different value proposition. You might have specialized in something like IT audits. You might have specialized in something like investment consultancy. And that's where you showcase and say, this is my unique value. This is what sets me apart. There again, and immediately show your ability and enthusiasm to offer solutions. Say like, sir, I've done GST implementation or GST best practice for many of the companies I've known. And here is what we do. So the thing is, talk of your USP. Remember, when you start thinking of your USP, obviously most of us would have something very long to say. Obviously, because we are professionals. But remember that you practice, pick up something very, very relevant. Call to action. This is the key objective of any elevator pitch. Suppose you met somebody in a lift or somebody in a meeting and said, sir, I would like to come to your company for an interview or a job or would like to offer you this service. And if you leave the conversation at that, there's no further action because he may not have your number or you may not have his number. Call to action will be something like, sir, I think, would it be convenient if I call you at this time? Can I have your business card? Can I drop you an email? Or, sir, here is my card. Please drop me an email. Call me up. Or you can give me a number, call on this number. Or this is where we can meet to take further action. If you've concluded your pitch, your elevator pitch that way, the best thing, come back and within the right reasonable time, send him a thank you note and follow up as agreed. So remember, if you've not done anything that doesn't call to action at the end of the conversation, it's the whole thing, the whole effort has been wasted. Yet again, once you have communicated with the person after the elevator pitch, deliver anything. If you promised him that I will send you my company profile, please do that. If you said I'll send you my resume, sir, please do that. And that's where you have built your success on that very short conversation. Now, some of the essentials you must keep in mind when you practice elevator pitch. Balance humility and hype. It's one thing to be humble, it's a good quality, but it's on the negative side to be too humble. And on the other side of it, hype can damage your image. So it's always necessary that you have the right words to show that you, while being not too humble, you have not exaggerated anything about yourself. Now remember the 3 C's of communication here. Communicate concisely with clarity. Clarity is of utmost importance. And the essence here again and said is that reducing a lot of information into few essentials is not easy. I remember this problem I used to have when I made some of the pitch decks for my company. I used to make a detailed information memorandum. And when I had a chance to talk to bankers or potential investors, there's a lot in my head. And I would very often struggle to bring it down to the few essentials. And that's what calls for practice. And over a period of time, I've realized that I need to spend some time to gathering those essentials. If, for example, you're talking about an investment proposal into your company, you're asking for a loan or you're asking for bridge finance or you're calling for private equity, there are some key essentials you'll find in that 20 or 30 page information memorandum that you have drafted burning midnight oil. Pick those up. And pick those up that will make a difference. That will make your company or your proposal in some way stand out from what others in the market have to say or others in your industry have to say. Remember, this is very important. For elevator pitch, less is more. The lesser you speak, the better it is, because you have not built any kind of a boredom into the person you're talking to. At the same time, you have effectively delivered what you have to say. And the last point is very, very essential. It's our ability to organize our thoughts in our mind, ability to organize the information and the data that we have spent years and years learning and gathering. Very important, train yourself to think on your feet, because at any elevator pitch, you could always face a difficult or an unexpected question. A PE fund manager, for example, might ask you, your industry has had bad news in the last few years. Why should I even look at it? Or he might say, with the prices of oil going up, your industry may suffer. Why do you think you have forecasted this into your business? Some of these questions can be anticipated, but not all. So it's essential that we have some clarity and some ease of mind to be able to think on our feet. Some more essentials when you practice. I don't need to say this to CS, but whatever the subject talking of, be passionate about it. And when that passion is visible and it's naturally flowing from your conversation, it makes a big difference. And that's where when you're naturally passionate about what you're talking, you can always find the right balance, as I said in the previous slide, between being too humble and exaggeration. Again, be confident, sound confident. Very important thing, avoid jargon. Jargon is something very industry specific. We all know what it is. But remember, you can use jargon if you think the person you're speaking to and you speak about are very much close and he might understand it. But even then, it's always better to avoid jargon. You might, for example, speak with somebody who's not from India. And if you speak about something of a typical acronym or an abbreviation that's used in India, and that's part of our jargon, it may not go well at all. So simple language can be sweet. And the person, if you have used a very common language word for something that's technical, it doesn't matter. As long as you have said what you have to say. Catchy phrases, simple stories can help. You can always have something catchy and say, sir, in our company, we have turned around so much of, or we have increased our turnover 150% in the last 2 years. Catchy. And a simple story, but story can be long, but simple, if you can say it something in 3 or 4 sentences or about less than half a minute, do that. Story can be something like how you've faced a very difficult situation and you've overcome that in your career, or something about how your company has had success, or anything that helps connect, because stories are always remembered. And most important, use the power of pause. If you listen to great speakers, like for example, if you could just go on YouTube and see a few videos of how Barack Obama speaks, you'll find there's a conscious pause. When he stops speaking and looks around the audience, and that's the moment when you are waiting to say, what's he going to say next? Pausing at the right moment and for the right amount of time, for the right duration of time, attracts attention, retains interest of your audience. So these are some of the essentials when you practice your elevator pitch. My recommendation is make a quick note of what you think, wherever you think you'll use elevator pitch. Maybe for if you're looking for a change of job, you're looking for more clients in your business, you're looking to do something for the business you work for. Write down your speech. Speak it out in front of a mirror. Record it. Have a friend listen to it. Look at it yourself and see what you've done. A good idea would be to give it to somebody whom you think is good at communication or who knows the subject, a good friend, and say, take the feedback. Nothing wrong. Probably it could be family, it could be friends, it could be anybody. Just choose a topic, do a bit of a rehearsal in front of a mirror, and play it yourself. Look at it. But please remember, never ever memorize a script. It doesn't help. When you memorize a script, and when you have a moment of a difficult question, thinking on your feet becomes difficult. Organize your facts in your mind clearly, systematically, so as and when questions arise, you know what you're talking. And the most important thing in this kind of conversation is try to steer the conversation across, rather than leave questions. So when you find you have stated your facts clearly, your first introduction has come about nicely, you made your point as to what is the purpose of your conversation, and you made your pitch, you've said what is the key thing in what you're saying, and what is the purpose of your conversation. The moment you've said that, and then you made your case, I think that kind of wraps up everything nicely into what you want to say. Here are some language essentials which will become part of your practice. The most important thing is what is called brevity. Try to speak in fewer words and short sentences. I'll try and give some examples of brevity. You could always pick up something you have written yourself or from an email that's come to you from a friend. Take a sentence and see how you can condense it. Say, for example, you're saying, that girl is wearing a dress that's all in blue. You just say, she's wearing a blue dress. It's fewer words, shorter sentences. One big advantage of brevity is it gives you the time to take your pauses in between. Brush up your grammar. That's very important. If the person you're talking to is good at grammar, or is reasonably good in English, he wouldn't like a grammatical error. And this is very, very essential. There's several YouTube videos where you can go and say the common errors people make. Make a note of it and see what, if you're making them. I'm not saying we're all bad at grammar, we're all good at grammar, we don't know. Sometimes we are not conscious about it. Some common errors that I found among Indians is they use the article the before a proper noun. They refer to a city like the Mumbai, which is not right. Because that's the flip side of language. Rules are a bit complex when it comes to grammar. It's correct to say the Bay of Bengal being a proper noun, but it's incorrect to say the Mumbai. Mumbai again is a proper noun. So there is the subtle rules which it takes a bit of a practice and possibly reading some good book or going on YouTube videos or going on something like Khan Academy where you can just brush up your grammar. And always please stick to a language that's common to you and your audience. When I say audience, it could be just one person. If the person, you don't know the person, you've started a conversation in English, it's going on in English, avoid using any word that's not in English. You might, for example, use a word in Hindi. You might be inspired by some phrase or something like that. That's best avoided. Because you don't know whether the person is good in Hindi or knows or not, doesn't know. Another thing is vocabulary is very, very good. The right word always has a good impact. In English, as in any other language, there are what you call antonyms and synonyms. Synonyms are words with similar meaning and not exactly the same meaning. So when you look at them a bit closely, you find words have different shades of meaning. So the best thing is to stick to commonly used words, avoid uncommon words. It's not good to show a person that your vocabulary is good and use a word that's not appropriate. And vocabulary building is sometimes not as easy as we think, because when we see a dictionary, we know what the word means. But to use it in the right context, in the right shade of meaning is more important. So unless you've come across the word a few times and you've seen it, how it's being used, what is a more important context, what's more relevant context in using that word instead of another synonym of the same word, it's better not to start using the word. I would want to wrap it up, this particular topic with a few more essentials that are not on the slide. One of them is don't speak too fast. Maintain a steady and quiet a space of speaking that kind of sinks into the listener, because as I said earlier, your listener is not always necessarily paying full attention to what you're doing or saying. Avoid rambling. Do not move from one topic to another topic. And I've already said that you have to have your thoughts organized. And if necessary, don't restrict yourself to a single elevator pitch. If your call to action cannot happen in one short conversation, ask for another meeting. There's nothing wrong in that. That's kind of basic essentials, but what this needs is a lot of practice. And whenever you have the opportunity to meet someone, make sure you have your business card ready and give it at the appropriate time. So there is always a reason to come back. And when you've made a connect, try and see if you can have something in common. So, sir, I met you earlier at this place, or I think you are a friend of this person, or you know this person. So next time when you call him or you send him a mail, you can always refer and say, I met you and I know you're this friend and we met in this place. So the connection always comes back. Now, where can we use this elevator pitch? People always think this can be used only in conversation. No. If you were to start writing your LinkedIn profile, you will find that these techniques very, very is useful. Because on a LinkedIn profile, you don't want to write long, yet you want to put all those catchy phrases. You want to put everything about yourself. You want to put your USP. You want to put those special things that make you stand apart, that kind of bring in attention, bring in you more invitations, and kind of encourage headhunters to look for you. So even a LinkedIn profile demands the same kind of skills or the essentials of an elevator pitch. Now that we have, I think I've more or less covered this topic. The essentials are here, and what it needs is a bit of a practice. And now that I have some more time, I would want to bring in another topic of communication. Essential, which is very, very necessary, because as you progress in your career, you will have somebody junior to you whom you're mentoring, you're training, and you are having the responsibility to give feedback. So if you are in a situation, and very soon all of us will be, most of us will be, where you have somebody to whom you have to give, this is what I find in you, or this is how you can improve, is feedback. And feedback is not necessarily given in an annual review. We don't sometimes realize that, but we give feedback every day. Now, suppose you're a manager of an accounts department, and you have some junior accountants with you. The first time you see somebody giving you a reconciliation or some kind of a work, you give feedback. You say, this is where it's not correct. This is not right. No, these numbers don't match. Common things that happen every day in our office. Whatever your profession, whether in practice or you're in work, wherever you are. One essential thing about feedback is avoid criticism. See, the art of giving negative feedback in a positive manner, that's what I'm talking to you about today. Negative feedback is stressful or difficult, obviously. Many of us don't like to be criticized. We don't want to be told what's wrong with us. The purpose of feedback. First thing is instruction. It clarifies roles and responsibilities, expectations, and teaches new behavior. That's fine. That's the instruction side of it. The most important thing it does is motivates. It serves as a reward and promises an external reward to the person. Let me give you an example. Suppose a child presents to its parent a scorecard that looks something like this. All subjects 100, except in mathematics, child has 99. And if the parent says, I told you, you did not practice your mathematics properly. Why did you lose that 1 mark? You've been too slow. You could have done better. This is not the kind of feedback that would encourage the child. The proper feedback would be, you're very good at everything, don't mind the 1 mark in mathematics, doesn't matter, next term you will definitely see all hundreds. And possibly you can say something like, that particular topic in mathematics, the algebra part, you were not too good. So why don't you work on that? I'll help you. And this is what motivates the child. What the parent has done is given a positive feedback and then quietly added the negative one to say where the child is and called for improvement. Now, these are the effective feedback essentials. Do make your feedback frequent and timely. Specific and use examples. It's always essential. Say, for example, a simple reconciliation statement is wrong. Show an example how it was done right. Avoid negative language. Don't say you're bad, you're slow, you've been negligent, you forgot. There are always words to change that around and say, you could have been a bit more careful. I think you forgot something. I think you missed out something. That kind of removes the negativity in the language and makes a real conversation possible. And a real conversation encourages real feedback. Provide actionable feedback with a course of action. That's very, very important. Especially we are professionals and somebody comes to us for a review. It's very important that we give them actionable feedback. You could have done this way. Or could you take this file or take this particular thing and see how it's been done? You could learn it from here. And that's what brings your subordinate or your team members into a much more comfortable conversation with you. Techniques of feedback. Always make a positive statement. And the negative part is what I call area for improvement. And again, a positive statement. For example, you could say your last month's quarter reporting was quite on time. You did a good job filling out the financials and the reports on time. But there was an area of improvement where you were lacking in time. This is how you could improve your reporting delay from 2 days to possibly 1 day or 0. And that's the positive statement you end with. So this is what's called the sandwich technique. It doesn't always work, but it kind of covers the negative thing in a very palatable way, in a way that the person is able to take it. Another technique is in giving feedback is what I call the SSC. Tell them what they should stop doing and what they feel they should start doing and what they wish to continue doing. Stop, start, and continue. Stop the negative. Stop the one that's not productive. Start something good, better, and continue doing it. This kind of wraps up two basic topics of communication, and I would want to take any questions at this point of time, or I can possibly go through some of the topics again. And another important thing for you in terms of communication is, as I said, a lot of practice. My recommendation would be to join groups like a Toastmaster club or any club or a society where you go and talk to people and you practice your conversation skills. A Toastmaster club is a worldwide movement, and you will find the Toastmaster club very close to wherever you are in your area. All you need to do is Google or write to Toastmasters International to suggest what are the clubs near you. My recommendation, go to one of these clubs as a guest. Listen to people talking, and you will find that there is a kind of a structured way where you gradually, your presentation skills, your communication skills grow. What Toastmasters does is puts you in front of a large audience sometimes, or a smaller audience, and makes it easy for you in terms of overcoming your stage fear, overcoming your ability to deliver ideas and think on your feet and then and there. A couple of things happen in Toastmasters. You have what's called a prepared speech, where you have chosen your subject, you've chosen your topic, you have practiced a speech, and you've delivered it. After you deliver it, there are other Toastmasters in the club who give you an evaluation to tell you how you could have improved in terms of your body language, how you've done your eye contact with your audience, your gestures, your subject delivery, and whether you've had an impact on the audience. It's what we have called in the elevator pitch as call for action. Another thing that happens in Toastmasters is a role play called table topics. Whenever there's a table topic, you're called on to the podium to speak, and a topic is selected right in front of you. You possibly have a few seconds to think and start talking about it, possibly for a minute and a half or whatever. But what happens in that time is your ability to think quickly and think on your feet is challenged. And when you practice these things a few times, it helps you organize your thoughts. It helps you think quickly and say the right thing at the right time. And that's a very essential skill in the office. Very often we would have found that in a meeting we come out and say, oh gosh, I should have said this when the boss said that. And that happens to everyone for several years in the career. So, and you always regret that. And having made, even if you said something, you always come out and say, I could have said that better. Is there a point that I missed out? Yes. And the next morning, when you're fresh, you think, oh, if I had said that, probably the impact would have been different. If I had told the boss that here is a particular solution to a problem which I knew, but I couldn't think of at that point of time. So the essential thing that blocks our minds from saying the right thing at the right time is two things. One is a stage fear. Two is a fear of being criticized. And of course, not organizing our thoughts. When we do these things, overcome your stage fear, and say in a language that's nice, polite, and precise, you don't have to be fearful. You don't need to have the fear of consequences. Know where to start and when to stop. That's the key essence of communication. And it's also a part of where the elevator pitch ideas are developed around. You must know where to start and where to stop. Even when you've introduced yourself, even 2 lines or 3 lines, there is a time when a listener would expect to say, okay, I've heard enough. So you don't have the luxury of 5 sentences for your introduction. Another area where elevator pitch techniques come in very useful, especially to young people, is when you go for a job interview. I'm very sure, I don't know, my statistics may be wrong, but 9 out of 10 job interviews, the interviewer asks the question, tell me something about yourself. And that's not an easy question. Most of us are not prepared for it. So let's take a few minutes talking to you about how you may handle that question. An interviewer asks that question not because he has not seen your CV. There is a good chance that possibly he has not read your CV. He's not at all looked at it. Or he has read it, but he is trying to see how you present yourself. And to say, when you start talking, ask people who have been to interview and face this question. They say they've been interrupted. Or the interviewer suddenly asks a question in the middle of the whole thing and says, okay, as though he's not interested in knowing more. And you're trying to, the interviewee is trying to present himself nicely. He's trying to put through everything in perspective. This is when I did my articleship. This is when I passed my CA. This is where my first work with Ernst & Young was. I worked in sorted. He's putting these in sequence steps. And suddenly, the interviewer has posed some other question. Difficult to shift your mind from that particular thought to the concept that's been asked, or the next question where you have to quickly jump. Possibly it's a technical question. And you begin to feel a bit nervous. How do you overcome that? The key thing here is when you're asked, tell me something about yourself, please be prepared with those few lines that are not in your CV. That's a good way to get around, because your CV is already in the front of the interviewer. He's looked at it. Everything's written clearly on it. Pick up those essentials of your profile which possibly match the company, because 9 out of 10 times you have researched the company, you know where you're going to, you know the industry you're going to, you know the kind of people you're going to work with, you know the place you're going to work for. So practice a little bit in advance, write down those essentials which bring about these specific qualities in you that kind of match the job profile, or kind of show that you're a good fit for the company, either in terms of its culture or in terms of what you're supposed to do, or in terms of even geographic location or whatever. But remember again, there is something in this that very closely marries into the concept of elevator pitch, for the simple reason that you don't have the luxury of time. And that's the key. And the most important thing is the interviewer has given you a tool. Even though it's a difficult question, even though it's not a comfortable question to begin a conversation with, especially in an interview, he has given you an advantage, if you look at it that way. Because this question helps you bring about something in you, that special quality. You can say, sir, I am very good at GST. And how do you don't just say, I'm very good at GST. Possibly bring that in after a couple of lines. You say, I'm qualified in this year, sir, and then I went to work for this place, and that's where I have become a mastered my skills in GST, and this is my expertise. And possibly that's the skill the company is looking for. Or you're into systems audit, and you've done something, you've written a code, or you've used a special program to develop an audit tool, or you've worked on something extraordinary that other people don't. And that's the essential to bring about. But remember, you can always use the answer to this question to turn the conversation to your advantage. I wouldn't say entirely to your advantage, but at least you set the tone of the interview. Because you have stated few essentials about yourself that are very, very relevant to the job. So I would want to wrap it up. An elevator pitch is a short conversation where you make an impression. The person, you leave the person something in the memory of the person to which he can relate to you. You've left your business card, you've made a connection, you've called for action. Follow up on the action, that's important. Concise language, good body language, a smile, honest, sincere approach to the person. These are essentials. And this is the same kind of skills that come into your interview questions. Because when there is a difficult question, you know how to think on your feet and steer the conversation around to something more important. You may not always be successful, but at least you don't feel nervous. And about giving feedback, yes, the essentials of feedback, as I put in my one of the last slide, was SSC. Stop what you're doing, start doing something good, and continue doing it. And the sandwich technique, there is always a controversy about sandwich technique, that it may not work. Yes, sometimes, if the person's done something seriously wrong, maybe the sandwich technique is not right. You may have to be a bit blunt and say, too bad, which is fine. But on a daily basis, whenever you give a feedback, say the good part of the person, then the negative part comes in as call to action or suggestions for improvement. Give practical advice. Otherwise, the person might go away from saying, this man has spoken to me for so long, he didn't tell me how I could do my job better. He doesn't know his job. That's the impression. Don't leave that impression in your team members. And then again close it up with saying you're good and you can improve. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to communication skills and essentials and leadership, because communication is a key thing in leadership. And as chartered accountants, we're born to become leaders. I think I've used my time almost. I'm nearly. And to hone up your skills, again, I would repeat, please look up your grammar, look up your vocabulary. Read a lot. That's very important, because when you're ahead of what's happening in the world, especially that's related to your subject or your specialty, it's conversations with you become very interesting. If you're into investments or if you're into the money market, you are always ahead on the news. You're talking about what's happening in China, what's happening in the world markets, what money rates are doing, what policies are central banks following. You are nearly there. When you're a tax advisor, you always looked up the latest tax notice, you looked up the court decisions, you know what it is, you've gone into some depth. And when you talk about it, you're able to bring in the latest. And the conversations become interesting. So, along with reading technical subjects, your grammar, your body language, vocabulary, and the way you present yourself. Pleasant, smiling, and that's the kind of relationship you would want with anybody, with your audience. These are the few essentials of communication skills. I think I'm nearly used to my time. I would thank CA Pradeep Baveja for giving me this opportunity. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. You can possibly send an email to CA Pradeep Singh Baveja or through Mr. Ranganathan, and I'll be sending you whatever I can share. Over my last couple of years as a Toastmaster, I've gathered a bit of material on essentials of communication. I'm happy to share with my fellow chartered accountants. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ravi. Now I request our committee secretary, Mr. G. Ranganathan ji, to please propose a word of thanks. Ranganathan ji, I think, sir, you may have to reconnect because that issue is. So, Ramesh, we have Ramesh with us. Our second topic is on financial structuring. Thanks. So Ranganathan ji is here.
Oh. Am I audible now, Mr. Pradeep?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you so much, CA Ravi Gopal ji. In fact, I listened to your 1 hour session very, very keenly. And many of our speakers have made a comment that when they were young members, they didn't have the benefit of somebody coming and telling them and advising all this, giving them tips. Now, members like you have actually learned the thing while at job by trial and error. These kind of sessions were not there. To that extent, I would say today's young members are very, very lucky that they have the benefit sitting at their home or sitting at their office desk. They can listen to these kinds of words of wisdom. Sir, whatever you covered today cannot be put in 1 or 2 minutes of, my vote of thanks, which I'll try to do, because you covered hundreds of do's and hundreds of don'ts. And the session that you took is not only covering, just the communication or the elevator. It talked the elevator pitch in not just communication, but public speaking, motivation, and effective CV, interviewing skills. I think all this will be very, very useful to our young members who attend the program. Not only to them, but also I would say that the parents, the teachers, they also must watch this program of yours. Your tips on being crisp, being relevant, not being ostentatious, being humble, striking the right balance, and then avoiding the local jargons which don't gel with others, using the catchy phrases, being grammatically accurate, the pace of speaking, the pauses, the gestures. Wonderful session, sir. Every sentence that you spoke was worth weighing in gold. Thank you so very much for a very, very lively session.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Many thanks, Rangnathanji. Ramesh, are you there? I cannot see you.
Yeah. Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
yes. Yeah, welcome,
Yes,
welcome,
we can see you, we can
Ramesh.
hear you. Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you so much.
Ramesh,
Pleasure.
I'll introduce, I will request members to please allow me. I'll introduce Ramesh now. Ramesh Jha is based out of Ras Al Khaimah, UAE. Ras Al Khaimah is one of the 7 cities which are called 7 Emirates in UAE. Ramesh is the head of Treasury and Finance at Rack Ceramics, EJSC, based out of Ras Al Khaimah, United Arab Emirates. Ramesh has extensive experience of working in corporate finance matters, including treasury, working capital financing, project financing, capital market, fundraising, financial due diligence, investments, and general management. His professional credentials, which span over 20 years, has blue chip companies including Birla Corporation in India and Rack Ceramics in UAE, where he has worked. Ramesh qualified in the year 2001 as an Indian chartered accountant, and he is currently a fellow member of our institute. Ramesh is serving as a vice chairman of Ras Al Khaimah chapter of our institute, and he is also a member of Accountants and Auditors Association in UAE, and he holds advanced diploma in management. Thank you so much, Ramesh, for being here with us. Your support at all times has always made a big difference, and I would like to mention that since you became a secretary of the Ras Al Khaimah chapter, I saw a lot of enthusiasm and difference in the workings and enthusiasm in the members of a chapter, and now you taking up the position of a vice chairman very recently, and maybe soon leading the chapter will definitely make a great difference. Sincere gratitude to you on this platform for all what you have been doing for so many years. Are you sharing your screen, Ramesh? Here?
Yes. Can you see that?
Do you want
Is it visible?
this? Yeah, infographic is visible. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yes, perfect. So I thank you for all what you have been doing. And I request all our members who are present here to please give a big virtual Ramesh.
Thank you.
The screen is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhadeep, for the intro, and thanks for having me. Let me first, thank our president, CA Nihar Jambuseria ji, committee of members in industry and business, and to you personally, Prabhadeep, for the opportunity. Let me go straight to the topic. So this topic is about financial structuring, and audience, as we know, are the newly qualified chartered accountants from 2016 November. So before I start the topic, let me give a piece of advice to my colleagues, to my friends who have qualified. First of all, congratulations to all of you. So now some of you might have joined so far, may have joined some industry, and some of you may be thinking of joining, and maybe some of you may have started their own practice also. So what I'm trying to say is that any thing that you do, be it a service, be it your own practice, it requires a lot of value addition to bring to the table. And what value addition? What I mean by that? As a chartered accountancy course, you have learned some skill set. you are different basically from the normal people. So you have that skill set. Now is the time where you can use those skill sets either in your own business, your profession, or maybe if you are working somewhere in that particular area of job. So you definitely has that edge over others, and definitely you need to pick that up quite fast. I mean, the early you pick up, the more growth that you'll be able to achieve. This kind of sessions definitely will help, as rightly pointed out by Ranganathan ji. Back in 2000, when we qualified, these were not there actually, and we basically learned while we actually worked, and so it's all out of experience. But now that this is there, and the world is also at a different level, we can't expect our members to lag behind, and therefore this particular initiative, which is conducted by the committee of members in industry and business. I have seen a lot of good topics which has been just before this, and I have got a chance to hear CA Ravi Gopalji as well. I mean, these are the things that matters actually. It's not that it's a 1 hour session, and these are the things which should be implemented. When we actually talk, I mean, sitting in UAE, outside country, it is all the more different kind of a scenario wherein you are not only dealing with people of your tradition, but even the people of different other geographies, other cultures. How can you mix in a different culture? How can you create a difference in that particular discussion? And I'm telling you, it's not that easy. People around you are very, very competitive. They will throw a great amount of competitiveness. What is required is for you is to gear up yourself. You have the skill set. There's no doubt about it. You have to just properly take that I mean, be it communication or the delivery, whatever you are giving. So that needs to be properly communicated, properly served, so that the effectiveness of that particular thing comes into play. Now let me go back to the topic which has been given to me, which is financial structuring. So before I start, let me give you a basically background of what exactly this is, what I'm trying to communicate, and why this session. When you are already qualified, you all know the basics of finance. Not only basics, you know the expertise of all these jargons, the financial jargons that we basically use in a day-to-day working, as far as finance and treasury is concerned. What we have basically felt when we interview either freshly qualified or from some experienced candidate, that at times we feel that there is a gap between what is in the literatures and what they actually understand. So since there is no practical working around them, we feel there is a lack of understanding basically on the topics. So this session is aimed in providing that gap, in fulfilling that gap. I would basically, from my experience, I will try to guide you about what exactly, how basically as an industry we see a new fresher chartered accountants to take up that particular subject. So I'll start from the very brief fundamentals, so that all of us would understand. There would be people of who will pick up quite fast. There would be some of our colleagues who would take some time and who need some introduction. So let me start from a basic example. Let's assume that you have all qualified now, so you want to start a business, right? So for the business, what is required? What is the basic thing which is required to start a business? Definitely you need some resource, you need some capital to start. You will need maybe some asset, manpower. These are the basic thing. But what is the important thing to start any business is the idea of business. Unless you have that idea, business will not work, because you have everything. There are rich people, too many, with too much money that they have, but they will not, start, they invest, but they will not start their own venture. Why? Because they don't have idea, or even they have idea, they don't have, that particular zeal in them that they can, implement that idea. So what is important is that there is an idea. It has to be a workable idea. It has to be effective, financially effective, and then you have to be committed towards that idea. And then, the business setup and, working, those things come secondly. So first is your idea of business. What is your business plan? So before starting anything, you need to prepare the theme and the idea around the business. So what is that? So business document that you'll prepare. Now once that document is prepared, it has to be financially vetted by definitely people like us, who knows how to basically check whether this business is workable or not. How to do that? We have all read in finance that you need to check what is the investment required and what is the return on investment which is going to come, whether it is acceptable return or not. What is acceptable return? We all know. So first is business idea, then preparation of a business plan, then to see whether that plan is workable or not, and then out of your skill set that we have, we check whether that idea is worth investing or not. So this is the background that I have said. Now let's go to the topic, which is the financial structuring. Now suppose you are an investor. You have $1 million which you want to invest in a market. In a market means for particular opportunity of yours. And you have a friend who has some idea, something like this idea, maybe some sort of a startup, maybe he's working on an app, something of that sort, which you are also convinced that okay, this is going to work. He has prepared some teasers to show that okay, now this is what is going to earn. You invest 1 million, it will become 1.5 million after 2 years, maybe 1.8 million a year after. Whether you will invest straight away, just on the basis of teaser, whether as an investor and as a chartered accountant you will invest. Probably not. You'd like to have more information on that. What sort of information you will ask for? What is the plan? So this is a teaser, this is the business plan, but how you are going to implement it? What are the assets involved? What is the kind of business that you are going to set up? Who is going to run this business? What kind of experience those guys who is running the business have? Whether they are all committed or not. Once you have answer to these questions, then you will be able to probably take a call whether you should do the second step. What is your second step? Based on these assumptions, will been prepared, by your friend or by a financial consultant of that friend, whether that is correct or not. Correct means whether that is going to work. So you need to do that vetting part. You'll see whether the asset which has been considered, whether the market value of that asset or the procurement value of that asset is correct or not. So this process then you will start implementing, and then you will see what are your opportunity cost. If you are getting a kind of a alternative return on a different investment at say X percentage, whether this particular investment which has a different risk element, whether this is giving that particular alpha between both the investments or not. So these things comes into play, right? So this is the first step. Now let me go to the slides. So in this presentation, I'll cover 4 topics, which is asset structure, working capital structure, liquidity and cash management structures, and capital structures. There are other structures also. I mean, when we talk about structure, it includes your, business structure. What kind of business setup are you going to do? What is your governance structure? So these are also there, but definitely from as far as finance is concerned, we look basically from the numbers perspective, whether, the number that, I mean, we deal with numbers, right? So whether the number which is produced or being prepared is giving the result that we are looking for or not. So let me take one by one. It's not moving. Yeah. So first is asset structure. So any business can have these, major assets other than the working capital. The tangible assets, intangible assets, investment properties, financial investments. So why I have considered asset structure as a different structure, and why not a total, of the investment. So see, for a business, the investor they have some, they need a return basically. So as a business owner, you have commitments towards the investors, right? So you know that the money is not free, and you're committed. You have a commitment of, say, X percentage. We'll go in the capital structure. So we'll discuss what is that X percentage. So you have a commitment, right? So that money has been received by the business. Now you are spending those money or investing those money into these assets, right? But why, as a business owner, will you invest into these assets if this asset is not giving you any return, right? So either independently or as a group, these assets needs to give a return which is higher than the return that that you have a commitment to pay. That's the idea of business. Otherwise, you'll start losing the money. So as a business owner, you are raising fund from one source, and then you are investing into a business or a set of assets which is supposed to generate a high return more than what you are committed to, give back to the investors. Now, let me give you an example. So suppose you want to put up a cement plant. So cement plant, as you know, is a capital intensive investment. It required a lot of tangible fixed asset. So you have convinced your investors and you have raised, say, $100 million at, say, a 12% kind of a rate. Now you are investing into the assets. So will you invest straight away to the plant? No, you will see what are the required assets. So what is meaning by required asset? So for the cement producing process, the assets which is required are definitely you can't avoid. So these are the necessitated assets which can't be avoided, because this is ultimately going to directly impact my cash flows, my return. But then there will be some ancillary assets also. For example, chairman's office, your admin building, your administrative office. You can invest into admin office separately, or you can make part of your factory building. You can convert a portion of it into as a admin office. Both are possible, and it is working out in India. There are companies who are still having their admin and offices where their board sits in the factory premises only, and there are entities who have a lavish kind of a admin building. The difference between two is how you approach the business and what is your shareholders' expectation. how efficient you are. If you are very efficient, you are able to earn more than, the gap between your earning and the expected return by the shareholder is very high. Then you have that ability to invest into an asset which is not generating that kind of a return. So what I'm trying to say is that any money that you are borrowing has to earn something. Something means it should be ideally either together or in a group. It has to earn more than what it is you are committed to return to the shareholders. The same thing we do when we test the impairment, right? We have all gone through the IFRS, Ind AS, and how impairment testing you do. So the concept is same of the impairment testing. The money which is invested into a group of asset, in that standard we call it is called what, ROU. So whether that is generating enough return which covers the book value of your asset or not. The concept is same. It has to ultimately generate higher return, more return than what you are investing. In finance, you have to say whether the gap between that return and the investor's expected commitment, expected rate is more or not. Why that gap is required? When shareholder or debt holder, they invest into a company, they take a particular risk, and with that risk, they in the rate of interest or in the expected return, they factor in that particular risk into the return element. So they need to say whether that risk, the risk that they have, they are taking, whether they are able to, whether the business is able to generate that much return or not. If the business is not able to generate that much return, then definitely they will sell their asset and investment, and possibly your share price will fall down. So from the business perspective also, you have to make sure that you don't invest in an asset which is not generating enough return, or something which you can avoid, unless you have come to a situation wherein you have your own capital. If the investor goes out also, you are not much impacted. Similar thing is with intangible asset. There are entities wherein there might be a huge requirement of intangible asset. You are buying a franchisee for which you need to invest into a large amount of goodwill. So you have to check whether the amount that you're investing into that intangible asset, whether it is generating that enough alpha. Alpha means the extra return over the normal return. Whether that extra return you are generating because you are investing into that intangible asset or not. If you are not doing it, again you can check. Correlate with the IFRS. You need to write it down. You have to basically provide for the impairment of intangible asset. In finance also, unless this asset is generating more return over the expected return that you are committed to repay to the shareholders and the debenture holders, this investment does not make any sense, and it is not viable from that perspective. Suppose this investment properties I have mentioned because there are entities who invest many properties which is generating just return, and and it is not for business purpose. So definitely at the start of any business, it might not make a sense to buy and invest into a investment property. But then it depends on business to business. Suppose I'll give you an example. Suppose you have started with a cement factory. The idea is to start with one phase. The first phase will cover only say 10 million square meters, and it will be followed by another 10 million, for which you need some extra space. So you have invested into that extra space now, because possibly after a year or maybe after 2 years, when you want to expand into the second phase, you'll not get that land. So you buy that extra land along with the land that you already have. From accounting terminology, definitely that's an investment property that you have made. But that investment property is part of your larger business plan. So in that case, it makes sense because you have a backup plan for that. And as an investor, as a lender, they will also understand this and they will appreciate the fact that you are committed towards this particular plan. Financial investments, there are businesses, who invest into other, businesses like maybe investment into equities. What is important is you have taken money from the investor for a cement plant, and you have some surplus which you are investing in share market. Again, that fact nobody will appreciate unless that investment has some logic. What logic it could have? You have invested into basically share of a company from which you are buying a key raw material, for example, and you don't want that particular buyer. So just to have a overall control on that buyer, you want to have some share so that you have a say when there is a maybe AGM, maybe board meeting. So they know that you are committed, you are also investment. Anything is there, so that particular supplier knows that you are committed to their supply chain. So that helps actually. So what I'm trying to say is, any investment if you are making, you have to do your own due diligence properly. It has to be justified. There is nothing called black and white. Just reading by the balance sheet, probably you will not know whether this particular investment is bona fide, it is genuine, or this is just a speculative investment. Once you go into detail, you'll find that there are reasons to do so. And as a chartered accountant, when either you audit or you work, it's important for you to go and ultimately reason out those missing links, and you will understand whether this is proper or not proper. There will be a business owner who would like to invest into these things, but as a chartered accountant, you have to red flag that this is not proper, and this is what is required. Then possibly you'll get the justification also that the business owner want to invest because of XYZ reason, and then you have to understand whether his reason is proper or not. If it's not proper, you have to come out. You have to basically either convince him or you have to get convinced. So this is how basically it will work. So summary of this particular slide is that you have got the money from the investor. Your asset, whatever you are investing, there is a cost to that investment. Definitely the cost is what your investor is expecting from you. Now your investment into any of these assets need to generate that particular return and more. If it is any investment which is not going to generate either today or tomorrow or in a total business plan, that investment you can consider, basically you can question on those investments. It needs a further review. Now let me go through the working capital structures. So why working capital is important? For a business, two things are, investment in two things are there. One is the fixed assets, long-term assets, and the other one is your working capital, which is required for a business. Working capital also depends on the kind of business that you are into. There are business which requires high inventory, high receivable cycle, and therefore a high working capital. And then there are business where the requirement of inventory and receivable are not much, and possibly the working capital requirement is very less. It is difficult to say which one is better. The investment is part of your business plan. Once you invest, your fixed asset and working capital is part of your total asset. This is what is required for a business, and it needs to be funded, right? So we have to basically look at whether, say, 50 million of long-term asset and say 30 million of working capital, 80 million is your asset base. Whether this asset base is earning properly or not. You can't do with fixed asset, that's a one-time investment. what is important is working capitals, wherein it's a short term, but on a revolving basis. So here there are many structuring which you can do, and which many business are doing, to reduce the investments. So two ways you can manage your return to the investor. One is you decrease your asset base, and second one, you can increase the expected return. Now, expected return increase is definitely is not much in your hand. It is the business operations who works. But definitely the asset base, by way of proper structuring, you can contribute towards that. So I'll take you one by one. Most of you might have heard already these jargons. These are basic as far as finance is concerned. So one way of structuring is supply chain finance. So what is the supply chain finance? Suppose you are basically a supplier to Reliance Industries, right? So you have just started your business, and Reliance Industries wants a 180 days credit term from you. Definitely you can't say anything, this is Reliance. The order value is very high. But to fulfill that, you need that much, money as a capital. What could be done? So the supply chain finance is, you go to the banker knows that this receivable is from Reliance and not from you. Reliance credibility is highly valued by any banker, not only in India, even outside India also. So they know that this is a receivable which is ultimately due from Reliance, right? So they will basically able to give you this funding under the supply chain finance program. How does this work? So as a banker, their risk is that if they fund this particular money, they are not going to definitely fund you. You have to basically supply the material. That invoice becomes due for payment. Now that once it is due for payment, once this invoice is accepted and not yet due for payment, so you have supplied the material and raised the invoice. Reliance, suppose in next 30 days time, they have done their proper diligence for accepting that material and approval of the invoice. So the invoice has been now approved by the Reliance procurement team. They have intimated you that, okay, your invoice has been accepted, your material has been tested, it's working well, so we are accepting your invoice. Your payment will become due after, say, 180 minus 30, 150 days. With that invoice, you can go to the banker and say, look, this is what it is. This is my supply to Reliance. They have already accepted this particular invoice. Can you, discount this and give it to me? The banker will look at it. They might do a cross-checking, cross-referencing. And once it is, found okay, they will go ahead and they will fund this particular invoice. So you are getting your money after 30 days, not 180 days. So you are getting a relief of 5 months of this particular, investment which is required. So your asset base decreases by that much. So these things were going on, and now what has happened is banks have started launching their, platform of supply chain finance. You can check. It's a very interesting development which is going on right now. There are fintech companies. I don't know if you heard about. There is an Indian, ex-Citibank guy. He has started his own platform called Invoice Bazaar, right? So they are doing the same thing. So what they are doing is they have tied up with the banks. As a new business, you go upload your invoice in their platform. Their platform will, send that notification to all the banks who are already empaneled, and the banks will then show the interest. Now suppose out of 30 empaneled banks, 5 of them show interest. Okay, we are fine. This supplier, the customer is Reliance. We are comfortable with Reliance, so we will be funding. Now out of that 5 banks, they will quote you rate. So you have got a competition as far as discounting rate is concerned also. So this is the importance of the startups which is coming these days. I mean, the example that you gave is that you approach a bank, and you know how the bank works. They definitely will quote a rate which is very high. Now with these kind of a fintech innovations, even that rate has reduced. So supply chain is coming up as a very good solution for any new business, as far as working capital management is concerned. Second one is factoring. It's a very old concept. These days, very less used because of the because of the supply chain innovation. So factoring is a simple. You tie up with a bank, with your bank, and then the bank will assess the credibility of your customers, and they will then on the credibility they will give you a limit, and within that limit you go and you discount your invoice. So basically for you are getting money now and not after 180 days. So concept is same, but in factoring they don't normally approach the customer directly. There is no I would say contract between the customer and you and the bank. In supply chain finance there is a tripartite agreement sort of a thing, and therefore it's much secured as far as bank is concerned, and therefore it is catching up quite fast. The rates are very less as compared to the factoring, and therefore it is appealing to the borrowers also. Sorry. Next is the inventory financing. Now, what is this inventory financing? These are the things which you'll not find possibly in many of the books. These are the new innovations which is coming up. So this is an alternate finance. You have to carry a inventory of say 90 days, right? So this inventory carrying 90 days means you need to have that much capital blocked in your balance sheet. So how can you reduce it? So there are companies who will buy from you inventory on day one, right? They will give you a cash with a condition that you will sell that inventory within next 90 days and return their money with definitely their interest which is agreed between them and yourself. So this is again a helpful proposition as far as new business is concerned. They are getting their money now, and they don't need to basically tie up that much of investment in the inventories. So that is also I would say coming up. There are challenges around inventory financing. There are complications as far as GST, VAT is concerned. There are complications around accounting also. But things are shaping up quite well, I would say, and there are companies who are doing it. In fact, this particular thing also helps companies who have some sort of a covenants with the banks, and that covenant gets breached if there is too much of loan. So part of that covenant they basically manage by partly raising this fund through inventory financing. The next is buyer's credit. Buyer's credit and supplier's credit. I think during your audit time you must have seen many import or exporting countries, companies that they basically borrow money through this particular instrument. So the logic is very similar to what we have seen in supply chain finance. In buyer's credit, you have a genuine bona fide procurement. You place that particular invoice with the bank. The bank sees the bona fide, the genuineness of that particular procurement, and they fund you based on your credibility. Similarly, in supplier's credit, based on the credibility of supplier, you get an extra credit period. So you are, instead of, getting discounted your receivable, you are getting a credit as far as your procurements are concerned. So similarly, trade trust receipts. There is also a concept of RCF, which you'll find large entities. They basically procure fund, or they basically help their procurements by raising fund through RCF. RCF is a revolving credit facility, which they get from the bank. Now, for the working capital, which is a cycle, it keeps on rotating. RCF works quite well. Now, working capital, there is two part of it. One is long-term working capital, which is fixed. When you start a business, you know that this much of working capital will always be required. So one way to fund that particular working capital is you take a long-term loan, get it funded, repay as per your repayment plan, and it's done. Second one is you take only the long-term portion of your asset funded by a term loan, and the working capital portion by RCF, on a revolving basis. So every, say, 2 years, it gets rotated by the amount which is required. Definitely the risk is that what happens if it's not, if bank does not approve for the rotation. So that risk is there. But it's cheaper than the long-term debt because of definitely the risk that is there. So these are the assets. So first we discussed about the asset structure, the long-term, and second slide we have seen what are the working capital asset which is required and how can we structure it. So these two are my asset structure. My long-term asset and short-term asset together is the requirement of a business, to be funded. Now let me go to the another structure which is the operational structures, the cash management structures. So what are these structures? So you have basically, suppose you are a business wherein you need to have offices, or you need to have, say, distribution offices or distribution hubs around the various states in India, right? You supply from that particular state. So for example, you might have a distribution hub in Andhra Pradesh, you have a distribution hub in Gujarat, you have a distribution hub in West Bengal, one in Maharashtra, and your factory is in, say, somewhere in Tamil Nadu, right? The business structure is such wherein whatever is produced in Tamil Nadu is supplied to respective hubs. It is warehoused there, and then you sell from that particular hub. How will you, collect the money from the customers? Your local supplies in Gujarat is collected locally in Gujarat. Supplies in Maharashtra is collected in Maharashtra. Similarly, in West Bengal, it is collected, and other states, wherever it is sold, it is collected locally. And then it is transferred to your main, office, which is in Tamil Nadu, in, say, Chennai. Now there is a delay. There will be, with this structure, there is bound to be delay in remittance of the funds. The funds are first collected in respective distribution hubs, and after the collection, they will remit that fund to the headquarter. So that, suppose that takes 2 days on an average. Now this 2 days on an average means you need to, your working capital or your collection money that your receivable is stuck by 2 days effectively. So how can you reduce that, that particular asset base? So you can, there is a concept of, actual pooling, notional pooling, regional pooling, and national pooling. This is nothing but a cash management structures whereby since these days everything is computerized, banks allow you to auto pull rather, these funds on a agreed, timelines. Suppose the agreed timeline is every day end. So whatever is collected during the day in all these distribution hubs gets automatically pulled in Chennai. So you have totally saved that 2 days that in your traditional structure, was your collection money was stuck. Now there is no such wastage. Problem with the pooling is the bank fee. Definitely nothing comes free. So you need to check what is the bank's charges, what is my total cost, whether does it make sense for me to go for this pooling, right? I'll tell you one example. When I was working in India, we were working on similar structures, and when we evaluated that particular structure, we found that it is cheaper for me to actually hire, some qualified person in these hubs and ask them to remit it online. We will not basically give this to bank to automate this. Rather, we will, once it is collected, at the end of the day, our people will remit this fund online from their bank to our bank. So this is actual pooling. So what is the cost here? The cost is definitely the manpower that we have to hire. But then that manpower will be able to do other, jobs also there. So part of their, man hour which is required for this particular job, we found it much cheaper than what banks were offered to charge. So this is all about what banks charging, what you charging, whether you are able to save some money out of that. But what is required is all these, innovative thoughts. And as a chartered accountant, whether you are applying your mind and coming out of these suggestions and actual fact finding to the management that this is what is happening and this is how you can save a company and save. And you will definitely get appreciated once these things comes into limelight. Similar is hedging and risk management structures in businesses which involves multi-currency, for example, as a currency risk. There is, suppose if the business is in INR and there is an export in dollar, in euro, in British pound, then it is subject to mark to market. What structure can you put to hedge, to basically capture that particular variation in the rates? There are many structures which is available. What is the best structure which suits the risk appetite of the business? Business might have their own risk appetite. What is the best structure which suits them? I'll give you one example. Suppose the business earning is very less. So definitely it can't take a greater amount of risk. So the business, the risk appetite is very less. So as a structure, structuring, you have to basically structure in a manner wherein the risk has to be very minimal. So what kind of structure you can put? You can basically talk to the banker, and the moment your risk start, you have to go and do the dynamic hedging. It has to be hedged at the time of at the time of risk when it actually comes. Like the moment you sold to a customer in, say, Europe, immediately you have to go and hedge that particular receivable in the bank as far as euro currency is concerned. Similarly, the moment you sell in, say, Africa, immediately you sell that particular currency as far as dollar is concerned. So it has to be dynamically hedged. There are large organizations wherein the risk appetite is very large. They do this particular thing in a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. And some of the innovations are there which now are implemented wherein these risks are done automatically hedged by the robotic processes. But that robotic should know what is the programming to be done, whether it has to be done on a dynamic basis, on a monthly basis, what should be the stop loss limit, where it should basically raise a trigger, because there is a element of M2M also. I'll not discuss much on that. I think I have 10 minutes, right, Prabhadeep ji?
Yes, Ramesh, 10 minutes.
Yeah. So now, since we discussed about the asset structures in the 3 slides, now this asset needs to be funded. So how this is funded? I mean, we all have heard about the financial structure, right? So financial structure is nothing but what structure have you put? Capital structure and financial structure. Your financial structure is capital structure plus other ways through which you fund your asset. For example, account payables, right? Buyer's credit. So these are additional funding that you made to support your assets. When we talk about capital structure, it is basically a long-term money that you have raised either in the form of equities or in the form of say some debt. But when we talk about financial structure, it talks about all kind of borrowings that has been made in any manner. So equity, I mean, I don't need to explain all this. Equity, bonds, debentures, ECA, if you don't know, it is a kind of a special funding which is provided by the export credit agencies. What is export credit agencies? So suppose you want to, for your cement plant, the example that I gave you, if the major assets of that, cement plant is to be imported from, say, Germany, right? So Germany want that export to happen, right? And there is a threat that you might import from, say, Italy, or you might import from, say, US, or maybe from China. So these export countries, in order to promote their export, they will kind of give a guarantee to your import to the bankers that okay, fine, this is a import which is happening, export which is happening from Germany, and we know the the customer, the borrower basically in this case, and we are fine with them. So they write the credit. Meaning, as a bank, as a lender, bank will see what? Bank has a money, liquidity has a cost, say 5%. And then bank see what is the risk that it is taking. Now, if the risk is to your company, they will add that risk element into that cost. So 5 plus say 4. They might quote 9%. Now, if suppose liquidity cost is 5%, and now as a lender bank see that actually the guarantee is from EC agent agency in Germany. So they will see what is the cost of that risk to the German entity. It's a sovereign entity. The risk is say 0.5. So the rate becomes from 9 straight away from 9 to 5.5%. So as a borrower, your cost of fund reduces drastically down. As a supplier, ECA, their export is getting promoted. So they are happy, you are happy. As a lender, they don't have any difference because they are getting the money that they are expecting. Term loans, so these are the different kind of borrowings, I mean, which are there. And when we talk about the expected rate of return, which during my session I have talked about many times, the weighted average cost of this equity has a cost. Term loans, ECA, bond debenture is easy to calculate because you know what kind of rate. There might be some processing charges. So what is the effective cost of this? We have all learned about effective cost calculation, right? What is important is how can you calculate the equity rate. Here you have to apply your brains. What is the risk-free rate? How much risk? What is the rate that you add to the risk the business has? We have all learned in the finance classes various methods to calculate that. Then what is the additional risk that you have to take it? There is a country risk, there is a business specific risk, and calculate. I mean, if you add them together, you will get the equity risk, the expected return which equity holder demand. So suppose the expected return is say 20%, bond debenture maybe 10%, and with the leverage which is applied, you come out with a weighted average cost of capital. So this is the rate which your lenders demand from this business, and you need to generate at least that much of return. Right? So business as a whole should generate that much of minimum return. Over and above whatever it generates, that becomes profit, as we know. So Prabhadeep, I think my time is over. I'll take if there are any questions, and then we can wrap it up.
Yes, we have around 4 or 5 questions, Ramesh, but I think some things you have already touched. I will quickly read out the subjects on which questions have come, and then you can see. Mostly differences being asked on financial structuring and capital structuring, and also difference between structuring and restructuring. And is financial structured finance same as financial structure or capital structure? This is another question. Then there is a question on accounting implications and how working capital affects business.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhadeep ji. So I'll quickly answer all of them. So one is, what is the difference between structure and financial structure and capital structure? So that I have already covered. That I've already covered. So second one is, what is the difference between structured finance and financial structure, right? So this I have not been able to cover. So when we talk about financial structure, we discussed about, these plus the working capital that, the account payable or other sort of borrowing that we do. But when we talk about structured finance, now this is something which is different actually. It is an investment kind of a product. Or as a borrower, as a issuer, you can structure your borrowing. Like if I have to issue a debenture, I can go and straight away issue for 10 years. But even I can structure that debenture. How can I structure? In fact, I have got that opportunity to work in my earlier organization. What we did is, we know that our cash flows required repayments in 5 years, 7 years and 10 years. So instead of straight away issuing a 10-year bond, we structured in a manner wherein the holder of that particular instrument will be paid certain percentage in 5th year, another certain percentage in 7th year and another in 10th year. So that helped as a borrower, definitely me, to match my cash flows. As an investor, they are seeing that interest rates are rising. So in an interest rate rising, they don't want to invest all the money now, right? So they will hold on to their cash. These particular structures help them because we are giving them this structure wherein they invest everything now, but they will get their money after 5 years wherein they will again invest that money at a higher rate, some money after 7 years, which they will again invest into a higher rate. So that helps them also. So this is basically structured finance vis-a-vis the financial structuring.
Right.
The third question was, what is the difference between structuring and restructuring? So this is the structuring that we talked about in my slides. Restructuring is different. Suppose my, everything has gone wrong, and after say 2, 3 years, 5 years, when you look at the balance sheet, you found that no, the asset which is carrying is not the asset which ideally is the market value of it, because you are making too much of losses. Definitely the value of equity has gone down. Your book value of equity is 10, the face value, but the actual value is only say 3. So you need to restructure everything. So there is a merger process, there is a demerger process. So these processes are part of restructuring, not restructuring. Hope I have covered everything. Pradeep ji, all questions?
Yes, Ramesh, time is also over. I request all members who asked the questions, if anything is left out, so you can please connect back and we will work on it. And thank you so much, Ramesh, for taking out time and having a very elaborative discussion on the subject, which is not very easy, and from the experience it builds up. Your significant experience working in a large organization definitely made a big difference today, and those who are in the same roles, I'm sure it will help them to understand some things better, and those who will be moving into these roles from our members of the those who have passed out in the 5 years will give them confidence to address the things in a better way. So, and in a very simple and effective manner, and in a very cool and calm manner, you had covered this, a difficult subject, I would say, and that talks about your skills of communicating, which was so effective. And we sincerely thank you and look forward to welcome you again soon with maybe a different or a same topic on some platform, and wish you very best for all your endeavors. And
Thank you.
I thank also. Any last words you wish to say, Ramesh?
No, I'm fine. I mean, I wish all the best to all the members, as well as all the best to you, Pradeep, for conducting, and congratulations for having these kind of sessions, which is definitely value added.
Thank you. I thank all our members who have been present here today and supporting us, and wish them all the best. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.